We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and surely drew their plans against us.
When we think of aliens, most of us think of something scary, something different. I think it's natural for us to be a little bit fearful of them, the unknown. That's just human nature. But how realistic is that fear?
What's out there?
Searching for answers.
Exploration. What is life?
Discovery.
Ancient cultures.
Hey there, I'm Kobe, and some of you may know me from my social media channels, Astro Kobe. But if you don't worry. My goal has always been to make space more interesting for the general public. And speaking about life beyond Earth is something I've done many times. But today, I want to get to the bottom of it and get some real answers from a NASA astrobiologist.
People have been asking this question for a long time. Everyone has looked out at their landscape around the world and tried to imagine how they arrived there, how all the other life that's there arrived there. If you want to understand something so grand as what is life, how does it arise on a landscape, how does it perpetuate, how does it distribute itself, you absolutely require that not only the living part of that equation be addressed, but also the grander understanding of the environment where the life is at. I'm Heather Graham. I work at NASA Goddard and I'm an astrobiologist.
Currently, the NASA astrobiology program is working to address three fundamental questions. How does life begin and evolve? Does life exist elsewhere in the universe? And how do we search for life in the universe?
The first thing we have to think about in astrobiology is, what is this thing we call life?
What is life?
What is life?
What is life?
It is summer here in Australia, and everything around me is teeming with life. Isn't it just incredible to think about how many landscapes around our planet alone can support this much life? Now, when we talk about life, the conversation tends to centre around life that more or less looks like humans. But life is definitely not just you, me, and animals. The diversity of life is truly mind-blowing.
Everywhere we go on this planet, we see life. Down at the very bottom of the ocean, in the deepest sediments, encased in ices, at the top of dry mountaintops. I like to think of life as basically fluxes of matter and energy.
95% of the plant is made of elements originally contained in the air. Some of these come to the plant by way of the soil. The other 5% originates in the soil itself. The plant has locked the sun's energy, the key and spark of life.
But
How?
We don't actually know yet how life on this planet began. And it's really a hard and tricky problem to get at because the Earth has looked wildly different over its history. Very different atmospheric compositions, wildly different ocean chemistries. The continents have moved around and been in so many different places. But for much of that history, life has been part of the landscape on Earth. And so when we roll back that clock and we think about the earliest history of the Earth, we can think about these places that are basically foreign to us right now. When we look at these fossils, we have to remember that they were the best at what they were doing at the time they were alive, but they're no longer with us, these very strange life forms. Life is everywhere, but the environment selects. And the other thing to think about, though, too, is that the myriad possibility space for life isn't necessarily represented by just us, by just this one really successful experiment that was done on the early Earth that became the diverse and varied family of life that we now have. So I don't really know if I would want to just think about how did this life begin, but how does any life begin?
How does any life
How does any life begin?
How does any life begin?
We know that water is the solvent that life uses here. It's all around us, and it's replete throughout the solar system. We have lots of energy sources on this planet, starting with the sun, and that's the basis of most of the biosphere. And we know that we're in a physical space that promotes all of the chemistry that's special to life. We're a good temperature and pressure for all of those chemistries to happen. So when we start to look at life this way and realize that life is this grand conversation happening with its environment, it makes it easier for us to imagine that on other planets, they also have rich histories, and they also may have been many planets over the course of their lifetime. And even more significant, this means that they may have also been able to accommodate many different types of life.
How crazy is that to think about? We look to Mars billions of years ago, or Venus. There are indications that they could have supported life in the past. And over time, these conditions have just deteriorated. So living became more challenging. There could have been a story of life similar to ours somewhere in the history of the universe. Just think about how easy it would be to have missed each other within the full 13.8 billion year history of the universe. With this widened perspective of planetary availability and what life is, it makes it almost statistically impossible to think that there isn't or hasn't been life elsewhere in the universe.
It's gotta be there, but where?
Where?
So when we're thinking about the kind of planet where we think life might be, it's important to think about a planet that has a certain amount of geologic activity.
Geologic activity.
We want to see that kind of geologic activity on a planet that we imagine might have life, because we know that there's other mechanisms for elemental cycling.
The hot lava is cooled by ocean waves, and vegetation soon starts, starting another life cycle.
So a mission coming up that I'm really excited about is the Europa Clipper launching next year. We know that there's a solvent there. It's an icebound ocean world. And when we get better imagery, we'll be able to better understand if it's a geologically active world.
An initial strategy when searching for life is to follow the water. Previous missions suggest that at the bottom of Europa's oceans, there could be hydrothermal vents, or openings in the sea floor. Those openings heat water and could fuel life in these ecosystems. On Earth, we see those same hydrothermal vent systems on our own sea floor as an oasis for life, fueled by chemical energy. Because remember, life needs an energy source, and with Europa being so far away from the sun, with oceans beneath the ice, the type of energy required for life would likely have to be chemical.
We found something. We found something. But
What did we find?
As we're approaching an exploration like the Europa Clipper, we have to be practical. And that means we have to think small. We have to think that we're going to be looking for small organisms rather than manta rays.
Manta? No!
The kind of ecosystem that is complex enough to accommodate really big organisms would have already modified the crust or the surface or the atmosphere of that planet in a way to give us a clue that life is there. And we just don't see that in the planets of the solar system. So microbiology is really what we'll find first.
Microbiology.
Every living thing on Earth has evolved from the lowly, the invisibly small microbe. Given nourishment, the microbe will grow colonies. Microbes have adapted to survive the most hostile conditions.
There's so much potential there, so many possibilities. They have all sorts of different life states. They also have all of these really unique and interesting consortiums that they form. They work together as communities to maximize their potential on a landscape, to really optimize for that conversation they're having with an environment.
Her prediction of microbiology here is really important. Let's back it up to where we started this video. Microbial alien life may not be what we have all envisioned, but it's a really exciting prospect. We have to remember that the majority of our history has been microbial. Microbes were in charge of our planet for some 3 billion years before bigger organisms even showed up. If you think about the grand history of the Earth, it was a microbe world for 70% of its existence. If life elsewhere follows the same timeline, we are far more likely to find a microbe world than, like Heather said, a manta ray world.
Manta?
No!
If we find a microbe, it means we found a planetary chemistry that discovered how to build life. Yeah, maybe we wouldn't be able to talk to it, but at least we would know that we aren't alone and life isn't a one-off occurrence. So now, with this new perspective on what life we will find, you may be wondering, if it's a tiny microorganism and it's on another planet, how are we ever going to find that?
How are we ever going to find that?
In astrobiology, we have this word that we use, biosignatures, that we're looking for biosignatures. Really, biosignatures is just evidence of life in the past or present. And it can be as simple as a footprint on a landscape. That's a piece of evidence that something was living there. It can be like fossils, just that compression pattern of fossils that you see in rocks. That's evidence that there was an organism there at some time in the past. And that's one type of biosignature that we use. That's an observational kind of biosignature. Chemical biosignatures are a little bit more specialized, and they use a lot of really technical equipment. And a great example of a mission that's using chemical biosignatures is the Curiosity rover on Mars.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
On that rover is an instrument called SAM, and it's basically an entire chemistry lab stuffed down into something about the size of a big microwave oven. And right now on the surface of Mars, it's taking rock and pulling out organic molecules that we think might be possible chemical biosignatures. But energy transfer is a little bit different. You're looking for evidence that something is using energy in that environment. A mission that I would give as an example of that is the kind of imagery that we're hoping to get with James Webb Space Telescope.
The James Webb Space Telescope, sometimes referred to as JWST, is the world's largest and most complex space telescope. JWST can analyze everything from the most distant galaxies ever observed to the atmospheres of nearby exoplanets. It is so powerful that we can use it in our hunt for biosignatures. You see, recently it captured the first clear evidence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of a planet outside of our solar system. Findings like these will give our scientists insight into how these planets form and the uniqueness of our own solar system.
There's another really exciting thing that we do in our search to understand our solar system, and that's sample return. So right now in our labs here at Goddard, it is all hands on deck. We are all madly working to get ready for the return of Bennu, the asteroid sample that's coming to us from OSIRIS-REx in September of this year.
You have to keep in mind, we still aren't entirely sure how life first began here on Earth, and perhaps looking at some of these asteroids will help us to understand our origins.
We have asteroid pieces here on this planet that we've had since before sample return, and that's meteorites.
These visitors from outer space come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. They are meteorites, some 4.5 billion years old.
I remember the first time I ever held a meteorite. The person in my lab who handed it to me said, "This is the oldest thing you'll ever hold. This is as old as the solar system." So we don't really know what the landscape was when life arose on this planet. And meteorites have been our lens to understand that chemistry. There's been problems, though, with trying to understand the chemistry of meteorites because they have to come through our atmosphere. So they've been heated, they hit the Earth, there's the potential for contamination. And so meteorites are an imperfect way to try and rebuild that earliest Earth. And that's what's exciting about just going to an asteroid. We can go and access that earliest planetary material and protect it and seal it up as we bring it back to Earth so that we know we're getting a really pristine record of what those small solar system bodies that represent the earliest Earth really are made of.
And that is the coolest part about an asteroid sample return mission. We are getting to look at a snapshot of what our own planet was formed out of.
Another really exciting sample return mission happening right now is what's going on with the Perseverance rover on the surface of Mars.
Confirmation of entry interface. Parachute has deployed about 20 meters off the surface.
Tango Delta, nominal.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
Mars sample return is a huge endeavor. It's NASA, we have partners with the European Space Agency. All over the world, people are thinking really hard about how we can collect and safely bring home and analyze these precious samples from Mars. This rover has a special apparatus, and it's making these rock cores about 6 inches long that it's putting in special tubes, and those tubes will eventually be returned to Earth. We have rovers that have been doing chemistry and looking at the surface of Mars, but now we'll finally get below the surface to see what's beneath. On the surface of Mars, there's a lot of radiation and it's very dry, and so it's actually hostile to a lot of the important molecules that we look for when we look for life, as well as life itself. But those things can be preserved in those rock cores, and we're really excited to see what's buried, literally, in those rock cores that can tell us about the history of Mars.
The Perseverance rover is doing some serious work on Mars to get those samples ready to come back home. But I think there is one last question that we still haven't answered. Why do we care about Mars so much? Humanity has looked out to Mars for millennia and dreamed about what it might be like on the Red Planet. Mars is our sibling. It represents what could have been if Earth weren't so fortunate. It is true that at the moment, Mars looks pretty dry and uninhabitable, but it wasn't always like that. The rovers on Mars have already found solid proof of ancient oceans and rivers that flowed on Mars billions of years ago. Data will continue to be used to develop plans for future missions to collect samples of the Martian surface in the hopes of identifying evidence of past or present life.
Astrobiology is a way of looking at life with the broadest possible lens. So what unifies all of this exploration we're doing for me is that we're building this data set, we're building our knowledge of the universe, and we're also finding out about ourselves, our relationship to our landscape, the conversation we're having with our own planet that we're living on, and how we can protect it.
For now, we can put scary aliens on the shelf and focus on the small, incremental discoveries that scientists are making with each mission that creates new benchmarks and expands our opportunities. We may not know yet how life began on this planet, but we've learned how varied life is, and given time, how little it needs to arise. We also got a glimpse into some of the tools for how to detect it, and we found a possibility that life could have arisen beyond Earth and is somewhere hidden in the universe, yet to be discovered. But my key takeaway is that today we live in a world that is extraordinary and full of possibilities.
It's awe-inspiring, and it makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth. The Earth from here is a grand oasis in the big vastness of space.